There's the exposure factor that they discuss. So they know through lots of research that if someone is exposed to something first, they're much more likely to buy it. The same thing goes with presidents that we elect or candidates. If we're exposed to them, if we know them, just by the name, just by the recognition, we're prone to vote for them. Back in the day when people still used to buy things in shops and stores, these people knew that if a shop assistant lightly touched you on the arm in a very non-threatening way, the chances of you buying the product went up like 50, 60%. And so they would teach their employees to do this, on and on and on. So the lesson here is that we're not aware of all of these things that are going on, of how much our emotions are actually governing and determining so much of our behavior. And the solution that I give in my book, the solution for us humans to actually become rational, like we imagine ourselves to be, is to become aware of this phenomenon. First, to not think that you're rational, to see the process. So it's not easy, but when you're feeling anger or you're feeling depressed, don't just act on it and mope or lash out, but why? Ask yourself why. What is going on here? Could there be something else going on that I'm not really thinking of? Is there something deeper going on? And just you may not get to the answer. You may not uncover that thing that in your early childhood. But just in asking that question, you're going to create a little bit of space between the signal you're getting from your brain and your reaction. And that space, that time, that 10 minutes, that 1 hour that you don't react is actually what's going to make you a more rational person in the long run. You'll be able to question, well, why am I really interested in buying this product? Is it because I'm being manipulated, or is it something that I really need? I talk a lot in my consulting with people who have to make important decisions. I can bet you that 95% of your decision, the strategy you're coming up with, is infected with emotions. I call it the rosy scenario. You're always imagining the best case that will emerge from this, but you're not seeing all the potential pitfalls. So you want to subtract all of these emotional elements before you make your decision. Going through this process is what will, in the end, finally make you rational. Talking about how emotions govern us, that's obviously something that emerged in our deep past that's not really adapted to where we're living now. But there is a power that we evolved from in our deep past that's actually extremely well adapted to where we are now and will be very valuable for us. And that quality is empathy, which is a major theme in my new book. And empathy is basically the ability, the incredible human ability, to get inside the perspective and the points of view of other people, to literally see inside how other people are seeing the world. And this is a quality, a power, that our ancient ancestors, well before the invention of language, invented as a way to increase their ability to understand the people in the group or the tribe and to work more closely together. And I say in my book, Mastery, and in this new book, that I imagine these early ancestors were nearly telepathic in their ability to sense what other people were feeling and thinking. I call this visceral empathy. But we humans have another quality that kind of counters this and renders this power that we all possess, kind of neutralizes that. And this quality is our self-absorption, our latent narcissism. And this quality isn't something that's necessarily wired into our brains, but comes about because of how we're raised, how we're socialized. I'm trying to make the point that we are all somewhat narcissistic, that we're all on that spectrum. The origins of narcissism, quite simply, are that we humans spend an inordinate amount of time being raised by our parents, much longer than any other animal. So we form a much deeper attachment to our mother and to our father. But a point is inevitably reached in this process where that attention slackens and the parent distances themselves from us. And it's very emotionally disturbing. We feel like we're not getting any more love or attention from our parents. And the solution that most people create in this is to create a self-image that they can retreat to, that they can love and esteem. And so that in these moments when parents aren't giving us love and attention and recognition, we can withdraw into ourselves and feel that we are worthy, that we are okay, that we can love ourselves. And this self-love operates as a kind of thermostat. So when we're feeling depressed or not recognized, it kind of raises our moods up so we don't fall too deeply down into this depression. And what's part of this self-love is that we pour a lot of libidinal love energy, desire, into this self that we create. We become fascinated with our own tastes, our own desires of who we are. And then we go searching for other people who are similar to us. People have noticed in studies that we tend to fall in love with people who either look like us or have very similar ideas or values to us, so that we're attracted and drawn to people who reflect who we are, which is another aspect of our narcissism. And we see that on social media, where people glom onto those who are creating kind of like a narcissistic tribe. Now, obviously, there are people who fall deeper into this, types that I call deep or toxic narcissists. And what happens with them is they never develop that inner thermostat. Because something was broken in their relationship with their parents, they were never able to develop enough self-love. And so the only way they can get that feeling, that sense of self-worth and recognition when they start getting lower, when things aren't going well, is to act out and get attention from other people instead of from themselves. So they become dramatic, and they kind of know how to get attention when they're children, etc. And so that's their only way of solving this kind of emptiness inside of themselves. And such people, such deep narcissists, can actually go pretty far in life, because as children, they developed a lot of flair and charisma. And if they're talented, they can become leaders, they can become CEOs of businesses, because of this kind of charisma that they have. But then they hit a wall, because they always need more and more and more attention. They're not really they really don't know and understand the people they're dealing with, because they're using them as objects for their own benefit. And they can't learn from their mistakes, because for a deep narcissist to admit that they had made a mistake is too painful. So even though they can become the CEO of an enormous tech company, and I'm not going to name names here, they're inevitably going to hit a wall because of this. So the point I'm trying to make is that we are all on that spectrum. We all have that potential. And in moments when we feel depressed or circumstances aren't going our way, we notice that we can become more and more self-absorbed, and that we have this potential to fall even deeper into ourselves. So I want us to get over this notion that the narcissist is always the other person and not me. We are all on the spectrum. The solution here is simple. First, we have to admit that we are narcissists. The person that says, oh my God, I'm not a narcissist. No, not me. That's exactly a sign of narcissism right there. They are the exception. No, not me. Look at me, I'm not a narcissist. The second thing you have to realize is that you're basically a functional narcissist. And that energy that goes into yourself can literally be turned outward and can be transformed into empathy, which is one of the chapters in my book. And what I mean by that is we turned all of that libidinal desire into ourselves. We became fascinated with ourselves, our thoughts, our ideas. We need to turn that outward into people that we're looking at. So when you're in a conversation with a friend or whatever, chances are you're not really listening to them. You're not paying attention. You're on your phone or you're somewhere else, because you're more interested in your own ideas and your own problems. That's where your energy and fascination goes. But you must realize that the people you're dealing with are weirder and more interesting than you could ever imagine. I like to tell people, think of the people you deal with as if they were characters in a movie. I had a job once where I was really depressed, people I thought were really awful, and I imagined that they were actually figures in Greek mythology, and I had to figure out which one each one of them was. And it helped me a lot, because now I had to think about their lives and their childhoods and what made them the way they were. So the people you're dealing with are much more interesting than you imagine. And so if you can turn that energy around and you can start placing yourself in their shoes, it will go a long way to taking that self-absorption and turning it outward. We're all working in much more diverse workplaces. 50 years ago, when my father had his job, it was all basically white men in his office. We don't have that anymore. People come from all different men and women, all different cultural backgrounds. And in this diverse workplace, it's actually fascinating to try and get into the backgrounds and the mindsets of this diverse world and get outside yourself and get inside what other people are experiencing and try to figure out their culture that they came from. It's like therapy. So this is an incredible power empathy that lies latent in all of you, but that must be cultivated and developed. And I give you many lessons in the book on how to do that. Now, another law of human nature is that we humans have what I call a self-opinion, an opinion about ourselves. And people who've done studies have shown that that opinion is generally more elevated than the reality. So we tend to think of ourselves as intelligent, at least in our field we're intelligent.